Hey guys, this is the MMA breakdown back with predictions for UFC 197, Jones versus Saint-Preux. As always, I'm starting off with my recap of the last event, UFC on Fox 19, Teixeira versus Evans. I was 8 for 11, 2,439 for the event. One of my best nights in a long time, maybe one of my best nights, maybe my best night of the year so far. But I've been doing pretty badly lately, so I'm glad that I had a good night, and that bumped me up to 3,680 overall. Still pretty far from the top, but better than being in the 4,000s, which is where I was before the event. And then I'll just scroll through my picks. Diaz versus Swanson. I was really tempted to change my pick at the last minute. I still think Swanson didn't look himself. He definitely looks like he lost something after those recent losses, and I scored the first round for Diaz, but Swanson did turn it on late. And then Dariush versus Chiesa. I was just sure that Dariush was going to win, and he was looking great on the feet. But Chiesa was able to get a takedown and take his back, and that was it. He called out Ferguson after the fight, and I would love to see that, and I would actually take him against Ferguson. All right. All right, UFC 197, Jones versus Saint-Preux. I think this is still a good card, even with Saint-Preux stepping up on short notice to fill in for Daniel Cormier, and with the second title fight, Johnson versus Cejudo, and then some other good fights on the main card there: Pettis versus Barboza, Rodriguez versus Fili, and even Whittaker versus Natal. I don't really like that matchup for Whittaker. Not that it's a bad matchup, but I think he could be, fighting a better fighter, a higher ranked fighter. But with the two title fights and some good matchups on the undercard, I think this is still a pretty good card. Nothing amazing, but it should be good, and I think it's a solid main card. I'm sort of looking forward to it. And on the prelim card, there's nothing there that really interests me too much, but let's just get started. So starting off with the UFC Fight Pass prelim card, at lightweight, Efrain Escudero versus Kevin Lee. Even though Kevin Lee lost pretty badly in his last fight against Leonardo Santos, where he was just really dismantled on the feet and eventually got knocked out in the first round, I still think he should be the big favorite here. Escudero, his biggest win over the last couple of years since his return to the UFC is Drew Dober, and that's really not that big of a win. And Kevin Lee is just going to be more athletic. He lets his hands go more. I think he's the better striker, and we really saw some great pressure wrestling and submission game from him against James Muntazri, who should be a far more dangerous striker than Escudero will be. So I'm taking Kevin Lee here, definitely. Escudero, I thought, looked pretty bad in his last fight against Leandro Silva. Got picked apart the entire fight. Really was at an athletic deficit in that fight. And I have to go with Kevin Lee. Even though he suffered that setback, I still think he's a strong prospect. Was on a good, impressive win streak before that loss. and I think he's going to dominate here. I think he can get Escudero down and either TKO him or get a submission. So I think I'm going to take Kevin Lee by submission. All right, next up at light heavyweight, Marcos Rogerio de Lima versus Clint Hester. Rogerio de Lima has big power, and Clint Hester has been finished in his last couple of fights by Robert Whittaker and by Vitor Miranda. But outside of the big power shots, Rogerio de Lima really doesn't have much else to offer. It was submitted by Nikita Krylov, and on Tough Brazil, was it 2 or 3? Tough Brazil 3, he was submitted by Antonio Carlos Jr. in their fight. He was able to weather the early storm, get him down, and submit him. So it seems like anyone who is able to withstand that power and take the fight elsewhere is really able to overwhelm him. And I think Hester has a more varied attack. I think he's more mobile on his feet. I think he can stay away from that power early, even hit some takedowns. I think he landed a takedown early against Miranda before he ended up, I think, getting reversed and got TKO'd. And against Antonio Braga Neto, we saw some improvements in his ground game. He did get mounted at one point, but won a decision in that fight. I think he got top position a few times on Braga Neto and was able to defend against the submission. So I think he's improving, maybe marginally, but still I think he has a more well-rounded game than Rogerio de Lima. And the guys that De Lima has knocked out, Ricardo Moreira from the same season of Tough, and Igor Pokrayets. Those are pretty low-level guys, and I think Hester is a cut above them. So I'm going to take Hester here to win a decision. I think he has, like I said, the more varied attack, far more high-volume striker, and I think he can hit some takedowns, uses his movement to stay out of the way of the power shots of De Lima, and I'm taking Hester to win a decision. All right, next up at heavyweight, Walt Harris versus the latest prospect off of Looking for a Fight, which I don't watch, Cody East. So I won't make a pick. Walt Harris, he had a couple of fights in the UFC, and he left the UFC and then came back for his last fight against Soa Paleli. Lost all 3 of his fights in the UFC. Krylov finished him early in the first round. Paleli finished him in the second. And I remember his debut fight against Jared Rosholt. He dropped Rosholt in the first round, and after that just got out-wrestled for the rest of the fight. So I don't think he's a guy who's really deserving of being in the UFC, just on a talent level, on a skill level. But I don't know Cody, so I have no idea. All right, on to the FS1 prelim card at lightweight, Glyco Franca versus James Vick. This is a bit of an interesting fight. Glyco Franca, the winner of Tough Brazil 3. And he's primarily a grappler, had a submission win in the house, and submitted Fernando Bruno to win the show. But that was kind of a sloppy back-and-forth grappling fight where neither guy was able to really gain an advantage. But Franca ended up getting the submission eventually. James Vick, I just think, is a far more seasoned fighter. He's been in the UFC for several years now, and he's really dangerous with that guillotine choke. Submitted Jake Matthews, who's a pretty good fighter. Submitted him off of the takedown attempt with that guillotine. Also got Ramsey Nijm with it a couple years ago. On the feet, not too skilled on the feet. Had a brawl with Walmir Lazaro. I think Vick would have the advantage. I would expect him to have the advantage here on the feet. And Franca, I think, with his pressure grappling, might be able to give Vick some problems, but I think Vick is probably going to catch him with that guillotine. Just the more seasoned fighter. Franca just seems really green still. I don't think he's really rounded out his game enough yet to put together a game plan where he's going to be able to just try to get Vick down and pressure him against the fence. I don't think he can keep that up for 3 rounds. So I like Vick here. I think he's going to be able to lock up that guillotine and get another submission win. All right, next up, next up at women's strawweight, Carla Esparza versus Juliana Lima. I like Esparza here big time. I think people really have discredited her after her admittedly pretty embarrassing loss to Joanna Jędrzejczyk, but you have to remember what she did to Rose Namajunas, who was doing great, is on a 3-fight win streak, had that great performance against Paige Van Zandt, and just won against Tisha Torres. And Esparza totally dominated her in that fight, on the feet and on the ground. Was really effective with her wrestling, was able to get the takedown almost at will, had great relentless ground and pound, and eventually was able to get the submission, the rear naked choke. Juliana Lima, she's a strong grappler. Her fight against Nina Ansaroff, she was able to lay and pray her, take her down at will and hold her down for the entire fight. And I don't remember her fight against Erica Almeida really well, but it was a unanimous decision. But Esparza, I think, is just on another level. That performance against Namajunas was still really impressive. And I expect her to just be the better wrestler here. Lima might be the better grappler, but on the feet, I think Esparza will also have the advantage, and I think she'll be able to hit the takedown and work that ground and pound. So I like Esparza here. If she was able to, do what she did against Namajunas, I don't see why she can't do that against Lima. So I think she could overwhelm Lima and get a submission win. So I'm taking Esparza by submission. Next up at welterweight, Danny Roberts versus Dominique Steele. I feel like I don't really have a good sense of either of these fighters. Danny Roberts submitted Nathan Coy in his debut, submitted him off of his back with a triangle, and Dominique Steele got knocked out very quickly in the first round in his debut against Zach Cummings, and in his last fight knocked out Dong Hyun Kim, not Stun Gun Kim, but another Dong Hyun Kim, knocked him out via slam in the third round, and was dominating him. Before that point for the entirety of that fight. I feel like I have to go with finesse over aggression here. Steele doesn't really seem like a technically sound fighter to me. I mean, he is aggressive and was really putting heat on Kim, but Coy, he showed that he can still get a win over some of these younger guys when he fought Jonathan Webb in his next fight after he lost to Roberts. And I thought Coy was just kind of an over-the-hill veteran, which he might still be, but his wrestling is still effective, and he can win fights. And for Roberts to get him in that triangle, I think that is pretty impressive, and that's indicative of a guy who is skilled and crafty. So again, it's not based off of much here, but I am going to go with Roberts. Again, I think it's just finesse versus aggression, so I'll take Roberts. Next up at flyweight, Sergio Pettis versus Chris Kelades. Definitely going with Pettis here. There shouldn't be any reason for anyone to take Kelades. I was actually impressed with him after his debut win against Paddy Houlihan. He was able to close the distance, outbox him in the pocket and hit takedowns, win the scrambles. But I think that was a bit of a fluke performance because he has just not performed up to that same level in the rest of his fights. Ray Borg completely dominated him, ended up submitting him, and he just barely did enough to get the decision win over Beal. Seems like a guy who does not have any effective striking and really just has to tie up with you, get you down to the ground, and just win on position. And Pettis, for as many mental lapses and setbacks as he has had in his career, I thought he really turned things around in his last fight against Chris Carriazo. I thought that was the best he's looked in his UFC career. His striking was as clean and crisp as ever, and he was really letting his hands go and throwing more volume than we're used to seeing from him. And on the ground, he was really controlling Carriazo. Did give away the third round, which was another mental lapse. But Pettis is just a much higher skilled fighter, several levels above Kelades, and I just think he's going to dominate him in every facet. So I like Pettis here for a decision. All right, on to the main card at featherweight, Yair Rodriguez versus Andre Fili. This is a very interesting matchup, and I have to take Fili. I know nobody's going to agree with me on that one, and I recognize Yair Rodriguez. I watched Tough Latin America that entire season, and I was really high on this guy just from his fights on Tough. And he's a super talent as far as athleticism and pulling off flashy unorthodox moves go. And he's developing. He's dangerous off of his back, and he's really got a very wild, crazy style that so far has been effective and really frustrating his opponents to the point where they just can't really compete with him on the feet. But being so wild, that really has its limitations, and we saw that in the Charles Rosa fight. For as great as Rodriguez looked in that fight, and he was pulling off all the cool, flashy moves, that was a split decision fight that Rosa could have easily won, and it was because he was able to land takedowns and pound on Rodriguez for periods of that fight. And Fili, in his last fight against Mowgli, what's the guy's name? Gabriel Benitez, he looked really calculated against a guy who was just coming off of a win where he showed really sound boxing. And, Fili really took his time. He was countering him really well and landed that head kick that rocked him and just finished him off. I thought that was a really nice performance from Fili. And his only losses in the UFC are against Godofredo Pepe. And, I can't knock him too much for that loss. He was going against a submission specialist, and got caught in a bad position. But then his fight against Max Holloway, that was a really close fight. He was neck and neck with Holloway throughout that fight, and got submitted in the third round, I think, off of his own takedown attempt. Holloway locked up a guillotine and submitted him. So this guy can compete with, he competed very well with Holloway. He's no slouch. He's a good fighter. And I just think that really wild style of Rodriguez, and it's not like he's finishing people. Didn't finish Rosa, almost lost the decision against him, and for as much heat as he put on Hooker, as easily as he was able to just style on him, couldn't put him away. I think Fili is going to be too good for that. I think he's really going to be able to counter him, and he's going to have a more measured approach, really capitalize on those big openings that Rodriguez is going to leave because of his really reckless style. And Fili has decent wrestling as well. I think he can hit some takedowns on Rodriguez. And Rodriguez is dangerous from his back, but I don't think he really has the technical setup that a guy with a decorated jiu-jitsu background would have. He just kind of goes for the kill, and I think Fili's top game will be able to nullify that. So I like Fili here. I'm not super confident about it, but I just think Rodriguez is a little too reckless. Really like Fili's last performance, and that's what I'm feeling here. So I'm going to go with Fili by decision. All right, next up, middleweight, Robert Whittaker versus Rafael Natal. As I mentioned at the top, I don't really like this matchup. Robert Whittaker, just coming off of a win over Uriah Hall, where for the first 2 rounds he looked great, and knockout wins before that against Brad Tavares and Clint Hester, where he looked spectacular in both, especially the Tavares fight. And Rafael Natal, he's just a middle-of-the-road fighter at middleweight. Has some grappling skills, has some kickboxing skills. Finished Kevin Casey in his last fight on the feet, but Robert Whittaker is on a whole other level. He's going to have a huge speed, huge power, huge athletic advantage, and I just think he can blitz Natal right away at the start of the fight if he chooses to. Natal can kind of bog fights down, make them really slow, tedious affairs like he did against Uriah Hall, and was able to do enough to get the decision there. Fight in the clinch and shoot in on your legs against the fence. But I think Whittaker, he's too much of a high volume striker for that. Hall, I think that worked against Hall because Hall gets really hesitant and he just freezes up in his fights. But as long as Whittaker is careful to not go to the ground or not make this a clinch fight, I think he should have no problem just absolutely outclassing Natal on the feet and getting the finish. So I like Whittaker by knockout here. All right, next up at lightweight, Anthony Pettis versus Edson Barboza. Anthony Pettis, he really disappointed me against Eddie Alvarez. I did not expect his takedown defense to be that, not so much his takedown defense, but it's just very easy to put against the fence, and when he does get planted on the mat, he has a really hard time getting up. And we saw that in the Gilbert Melendez fight, and of course going back to some of his first fights in the UFC. He got out wrestled by Clay Guida, and even Jeremy Stevens took him the distance, was able to get a few takedowns on him. But I expected him to really shore up that hole in his game, after the loss to RDA, who basically had the same game plan as Melendez, but was able to just implement it far more effectively. But of course, Barboza, he's no wrestler, and he's going to strike with Pettis. And even in the Alvarez fight, Pettis was still tearing him up at range anytime he had space and they were striking. Alvarez had nothing for him. And I think Pettis is still a super talented fighter. He's the former champ, and just go back and watch his fights against Donald Cerrone. His fight to win the belt against Ben Henderson, where he's just so slick on the feet, and got the submission against Ben Henderson. The guy is still very athletic and very dangerous from everywhere. Really, it's just when he gets these really guys solely focused on grappling and holding him down that they can frustrate him. But Barboza's going to strike with him, and Barboza is not an aggressive striker. He was against Cerrone, and he paid for that. After that, he seemed to really kind of become more of a counter striker. The Bobby Green fight, the Michael Johnson fight, even against Paul Felder, the guy is always moving backwards, trying to counter from there, and I think that's going to allow Pettis to just do whatever he wants to him. And Pettis, he's a counter striker as well, but when he wants to explode and come forward, he can, again, like he did to Cerrone. The Michael Johnson fight, Barboza really could not offer any forward pressure, just moving back the entire time. Really got frustrated by the pressure and the forward movement of Johnson. So I just think Pettis, he's they're both kind of dynamic strikers at range, but Pettis I just think is better, more lethal, more unorthodox moves. I got to go with Pettis here. I think this is finally going to be his rebound fight, where he gets an impressive win. I think he can pull out a finish late in this fight, and Barboza also is easy to hurt if you continue to put volume on him throughout the fight, like Ferguson did. And he's always struggled with pressure wrestle boxers like Jamie Varner and Danny Castillo. So I think Pettis is going to be able to get a finish here. All right, next up, for the flyweight title, Demetrius Johnson versus Henry Cejudo in the co-main event. I think it's going to be a typical Demetrius Johnson fight. I think he's pretty much going to outclass Cejudo. I don't think he'll get a finish here, although I really wouldn't be surprised if he got a knockout win. But Cejudo, I think the fans and the MMA media are really overrating this guy. I respect his his Olympic gold medal in wrestling, but just look at his fight against Chico Camus. It was just a sloppy back and forth brawl. And do you think that's really going to work against Demetrius Johnson? This guy hasn't even really dominated people with his wrestling too much in the UFC. He did against Chris Carriasso, but he seems to really be dead set on boxing with guys like he did against Formiga and Chico Camus and Dustin Kimura in his debut. And I don't know if he's trying to prove a point, but I can't think of that fight against Chico Camus where they're just winging crazy shots at each other, no defense on display at all. I can't recall that and think that he's going to have any chance on the feet against Johnson. And Johnson, I thought after that Benavidez knockout, he was going to start. We were going to see that more from him. More knockouts, be more of a a knockout striker, but we haven't. Against Kyoji Horiguchi and John Dodson, really didn't do much damage to either of those guys. I mean, he's outpointing them. He's outclassing them, but he didn't do much damage. I don't suspect that he will against Cejudo, but if Cejudo just starts, trying to wing wild shots like that, I could see Johnson really capitalizing. And Johnson, he's really a great MMA wrestler in contrast to Cejudo, who has the Olympic background, but we haven't really seen too much of his wrestling game in the UFC. I wouldn't be surprised if Johnson is able to take him down and out-wrestle him. So I like Johnson here. I think it's going to be a typical Mighty Mouse fight. It'll probably be pretty boring. Cejudo, I do think will have a strength advantage if he's able to tie him up, get his hands on him, really fight in the phone booth and fight in the clinch. But Johnson's just so elusive that I don't see Cejudo being able to do that. I don't think he has the speed to close the distance like that. I think Johnson's just going to outpoint this guy all day. So Demetrius Johnson for a decision win. All right, and then the main event for the light heavyweight strap, John Jones versus Ovince St. Preux. Basically, Ovince St. Preux has no chance to win in this fight, and he's a dangerous fighter. I like this guy. I picked him to win against Cummins. I picked him to win against Cavalcante. He is a dangerous, very powerful striker, and even against Glover, who I also picked him to win against, he tagged Glover early in that fight, and ended up getting out wrestled. And from there, if he gets a good wrestler, good grappler on top of him, he looks like a fish out of water. It's the same thing in the Ryan Bader fight. He just can't fight off of his back. He can't get back to his feet. Did a little bit. He did that against Bader and did that against Teixeira, but especially Teixeira was able to really do damage after the first time he got him down with ground and pound, eventually submitted him. But in that Teixeira fight, I was pretty disappointed the way Preux fought. He basically looked like he was conceding defeat. By the way, he was just throwing everything at him from the outset of that fight. And I wanted to see him be more patient. But if he's smart here, he's going to fight in exactly that way, the same way he did against Teixeira. Just absolutely go for broke against Jones. That is his only chance because, like I said, the guy can't fight off of his back. He can't deal with good wrestlers, and he's not a technical striker. He's been improving there a little bit, but still not a technical striker. So again, I think if he's smart, if he really wants to give himself the best chance to win, even if it means he might get knocked out, might get finished, just absolutely go for broke against John Jones. And if he does that, he's powerful, and if you want to factor in that it's a long layoff for Jones, and all of the stuff that's been going on in his life, outside of the cage. If you want to throw that in there, you might be able to convince yourself that Preux might be able to land something and put Jones out. I don't think that. I think that's very unlikely. But I think if Preux does go for broke, he might be able to land something hard on Jones. And Jones, in the past, has proven to be a slow starter. Rashad Evans landed that head kick on him. Machida was able to tag him a few times early in their fight. The armbar against Belfort. So I think Preux will do something like that. Just blitz him, throw everything at him. And, we might see Jones eat a few hard shots. I don't think he's going to get rocked. Jones has a very good chin. But he might eat a few hard shots. I think Preux could get out of the first round, but from there, I think Jones is going to get him in the clinch and just drag him down, take him down easily, and from there he should either just pound him out. Might be the return of the John Jones ground and pound elbow strikes. I think he'll just cut him up from there, or take his back and get a rear naked choke. So I like John Jones here, big, definitely. Like I said, Ovince St. Preux basically has no chance. But I'm going to go with Jones for a second round finish. And I'm going to go with TKO. All right, guys. Well, those are my predictions for UFC 197, Jones versus St. Preux. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Link is in the description. And I will be back soon with predictions for Fight Night Rotterdam, Overeem versus Arlovsky. Take care, guys. I'll see you later. Bye.